friends. Welcome to episode 343 of School Librarians United. I am your host, Amy Herman. This podcast is dedicated to the issues and challenges school librarians face every day. As a school librarian in my 19th year, I knew I wanted a podcast which addressed the nuts and bolts of running a successful library program. I don't claim to have the answers, but I hope that this is a platform to share resources and exchange ideas. Now is a perfect time to mention that all the ideas and opinions expressed in this podcast by myself, my interview guests, and listeners who reach out to the podcast are our own and do not reflect those of our school districts. When incorporating research, I always make sure to cite my sources. So whether you are a novice or a veteran school librarian, this podcast has something for you. I welcome you and all listeners to reach out with your feedback and episode suggestions. You can reach me on Facebook, on X, formerly known as Twitter. My handle is @LMS_United. On Threads and Instagram, you can find me at School Librarians United and on Blue Sky at SLU Podcast, or the email address schoollibrariansunited@gmail.com. If you include your mailing address, I'll be sure to send you a podcast sticker. And now for today's episode, Building Media Skills Through Video Production, and my conversation with Kelsey LaPort. Friends, I'm so excited. Kelsey LaPort, welcome to the podcast.
Well, thank you. I'm very happy to be here.
So we are in for a treat, friends. Kelsey did this fantastic presentation, and I was one of the lucky attendees to sit in your audience for this presentation at AASL in St. Louis. And I got to be honest, I am somewhat predatory when I go to these conferences. I sort of map out sessions that I definitely want to see in person, sessions where I'll just sort of walk in and say, hey, if you want to do an episode, reach out and feel free to share your content. But for Kelsey, I was just in the audience, and then I think I came and talked to you afterwards, right?
That is right. Yeah, you beelined. I was like, ooh, this person wants to say something important.
I think I waited till your presentation was over.
Yes, you managed to do that, correct.
Well, and sometimes I was trying to double time. I was trying to go to two sessions, and I'd go to the beginning of one session, and I'd go to the end of another session. Friends, when I say there were approximately 20 concurrent sessions per section, like when they offered concurrent sessions, you had a choice of like 20 different things you could go to.
It was hard to pick.
It was wild. I said last week, it's a conference on steroids because it's like having going to your state conference, but it's just bigger. Kelsey, I was one of the lucky people in your audience, and now our listeners are going to get to benefit from this amazing presentation that you put together for the purposes of presenting to a live audience. We're going to share this with our listening audience, but would you first introduce yourself, tell us about your library, the grades you serve, and, some of the things what's your schedule like?
So, hi, I'm Kelsey LaPort. I am an elementary library teacher in Long Island, New York. So I teach pre-K through fifth grade. I'm on a fixed schedule. So I see all of my classes once a week, which is great. Be able to see almost 400 of our students.
So I was curious. So when you teach 400 students a week, do you have any time for library responsibilities or processing or any sort of, I don't know, maybe you might want to shelve some of those books? Do you have an assistant?
Oh, that's such a tricky question. So I have an aide. She used to be full-time, which was amazing. We talked earlier about work moms, so she's definitely my work mom. But we had some budget cuts, and now she's split between the library and kindergarten. So I'm trying to figure out this year, and I think, a lot of people don't have aides, so I feel so ridiculous ever complaining about it, but it's also many programs were set with the understanding that I had an aide. I'm called the queen of clubs because I love after school clubs. I have before school clubs. I have books clubs. I mean, you name it. And to be able to maintain that has been a little tricky this year. But yeah, like the shelving and the just getting any larger project done has definitely been something I'm not great at this year. I'm getting there. I'm trying.
Well, and we do find sometimes it's not pretty, but we do find those workarounds. I know when I taught elementary, I always had some of those library kids who just love to. Oh, I know where those books go. I know where those books go, and if we can at least get them on the right shelf, it didn't matter if the books were in order, but getting a lot of those books back on the shelf. Maybe sometimes we resorted to things like bins, and the kids could sort of organize the books and put them in the bins and at least get them on the right shelf. This is the cat shelf. This is the dog shelf. Hey, these are dinosaur books. We know where those go. So no, it doesn't have to be pretty. And remember that the standard to which you hold yourself is so much higher than anything that anybody could possibly expect. I remember my library would be a disaster. Like if I walked in, I could tell there was with the librarian eyes that I have, this place is a disaster. But I had put together like a bulletin board, or I had some cool display out, and I got all these great comments from teachers and non-librarians. They're like, oh my God, that's so cool. Oh, that's so cool. Or I had murals. I had students who came and painted murals. Did they notice that the library shelves were messy? No, they absolutely did not. But I did a new bulletin board, and they were very excited about that.
Yeah, well, bulletin boards are my like kryptonite, so I definitely rely on my students for those.
And I had some parent volunteers who were absolutely phenomenal too, because I agree. I lack the artistic skills. Mm-hmm. So Kelsey, I have to ask, because librarianship is not your first calling. You had a previous profession, but I think it does give you some context for our later conversation, I think, because you definitely had a career before you became an elementary school librarian.
Yeah, I always giggle because it's like the career I was always meant to have. But then when I look back, it makes sense that I did it the way I did. So I spent the first part of my career in advertising. So I worked for 15 plus years in marketing, advertising, this thing called media planning. That's kind of like the job that no one actually knows what it is. And then right before I moved over into education, I worked in sales, which is very much the antithesis of education. But I found so many synergies in it, strangely, even if it's just being able to stand in front of a room full of people who are not interested in anything you want to say, and trying to get them to care and be engaged. So it was an interesting transition, but a lot more people do this than I realized. I've talked to a lot of different people who've kind of done the marketing to education track.
Well, and no effort is ever wasted. And you're absolutely right that when you have those skills, they're going to sort of creep into what you bring to your students as a school librarian. You just couldn't have possibly known that in your previous occupation.
Right. But now, like in hindsight, I sit here and go, okay, so every job I ever had, I tried to incorporate reading. I was like, let's do a book club. Let's do something with like reading partnership. And then just the fact that it took me, 20 years to figure out I should have always been a librarian is, it is, and now I understand it's a no-brainer.
Well, you're not alone, because the majority of people I talk to, librarianship is a second calling. It is definitely not their first. It is rare. I think I have 5 people I've encountered who landed that library job before they were 25. So, no, I think it is far more common to have moved into this. It's an evolution. It's sort of a self-discovery.
Yeah. And I think the job 20 years ago was not the job it is now. So I think that that's a big part of it, too.
Well, and newsflash, you're not the same person you were 20 years ago.
Touche.
Oh, so true, so true. So listen, you're also an emerging leader. To me, I just am in awe, because the first 5 years of my librarianship, I never came up for a breath. I was always just trying to get by day. It was not pretty. I'm glad there wasn't people weren't aware of me when I was a new librarian, because it was a struggle for sure. But I am curious to know, when I read about you, you are the first certified sustainable librarian I've ever met. What is that?
Being a certified sustainable librarian was something that I kind of stumbled upon in my many connections. So you mentioned emerging leaders. I I applied for that, didn't get in the first year, applied for it again, and then was part of a cohort of every type of librarian you could have. There was, obviously school. I think I was the only school librarian, and then public and academic. And we ended up working on a project that was not really connected to what I do on a day-to-day basis. But I met a young lady in that group who's also from Long Island. She's very much into. She's actually worked for the Lindenhurst Public Library, which is one of the first certified sustainable public libraries, and they're very much into educating on becoming a sustainable library or librarian. And so she inspired me. She's the person that I am writing a book with coming out next year. But the sustainable certification, it's a little newer for school librarians. It really kind of found its core and grounding in public libraries, and it's quite a process. But for school librarians, it is interestingly a lot of what we're already doing, and just making sure and evaluating your lessons and your programs to make sure that they are hitting on whether it's environmental, whether it's financial, sustainability, or social. So we talk about libraries. It's creating access, making students feel included, making sure everyone is able to get the books they need, sharing resources. So we're already doing all this stuff. It's really more of evaluating and seeing if there's areas for improvement.
It is that additional level of scrutiny, and you are definitely it's not even just checking off boxes. You're like looking sort of hypercritically at what you do to make sure that it's done with intention, and it has a great deal of planning towards it. You're not wasting resources when they need to be more, equitably distributed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're right. It's really just that sustainable lens.
I love
that
it.
You're viewing the things you're doing already.
And you mentioned your book. Is this with ALA Editions, or who is publisher?
Yes, ALA Editions. Another, I love to make sure everyone's aware of the fact that the struggle is real. And so my writing partner and I, Noelle Reich, we decided we wanted to pitch this idea to ALA Editions after being part of the emerging. We were like, we love working together. What else can we do? So we decided to pitch this idea, and they're so nice. The people that we're working with at ALA Editions, Stephanie and Jamie, they are just so incredibly generous with their time. And they're like, not quite. How about this? And then it was a year of proposals and five different versions until they were, it finally was accepted, because it's a competitive, especially with sustainability. And I listened to an earlier podcast of yours. It's a topic that is being discussed by many people, so we just had to make sure we were finding the right topic.
Well, and what I love is persistence pays off, as in so many aspects of what we do in our profession, and especially when you extend yourself and you put yourself out there. You're vulnerable, but you're willing to do the work. I did hear from the last author of an ALA edition book that I interviewed that you now can go to conferences for free.
Yeah. I say that the AASL was my first time being able to attend, and part of it was because I've been a school librarian this is my 6th year, so a bit of a newbie, but I was able to go because of that very generous offer from ALA Edition. So this previous AASL, I went and did they called it a huddle, so it was just really kind of taking the opportunity to get people together at the conference, talk about the topic of my book, which is eco-anxiety, and how public and school librarians can help young people navigate eco-anxiety. And so I heard great feedback from the audience, just kind of talking about the topic, but the book doesn't exist yet. So next AASL in Portland, we'll be able to actually promote the book and go for free.
And when this book comes out, we got to do an episode. Absolutely. ALA Editions will send me any book I ask for. So yes, they have been very, very supportive in that regard. And I will definitely, count on being able to see your presentation in Portland. That's going to be phenomenal. And isn't it fun to like something already on your calendar 2 years from now? And I can't wait. But
I'll book my flights now.
I will say, it's been a while since I've interviewed somebody from Australia, but echo anxiety is very real. And I remember years ago when Australia was on fire, there was a lot of echo anxiety from the young people, especially, who are very cognizant that even in their short lives, this is not normal. This is not typical.
Yeah.
So
no, it's something that is, even when I was starting to talk about the topic, I didn't even know that I had it. So it's just like reflecting. I grew up in Colorado. I grew up with parents who were very, shopping at the health food store and embracing nature and all those things. And so for years and years and years, I didn't realize that I had eco anxiety, or sometimes referred to as climate anxiety. And it's just, and it actually, ties very nicely into the topic of my presentation at AASL, the media literacy, because a lot of that anxiety is coming from the messages that we're receiving and the confusing and overwhelming number of messages we're receiving through media.
The bombardment. Mm-hmm. And some of that is just because of how social media works.
Right.
And it is very pervasive. And it is something which, if you allow it, we are assaulted with those messages on a very regular basis, whether we want to see it or not, and just because of algorithms. So so let's go ahead and start. You've included your AASL presentation in this, and friends, this is one of those wonderful opportunities for us to learn. I agree. I understand there was like 2,000 school librarians in St. Louis, but even that is just a fraction of the school librarians who, while they didn't go to AASL in St. Louis, would love very much to learn from those who presented at this conference. So thank you very much right now for your generosity. You put an amazing amount of work into this presentation. I saw you present it. And now we are going to sort of discuss our way through what you were sharing with your audience, more in a conversational way, and then make sure that our listeners have the benefit of the full presentation, and they can always reach out to you.
Absolutely. I love sharing.
Good, because that was like that's like an expectation if you're going to be here and sharing this conversation. So let's go ahead. Your presentation focuses on the work you've done with upper elementary school students, but I am thinking that now that I've had the benefit of looking at it, that this is something that school librarians in upper grades, in middle school, and even into high school could use as a model to also adapt to teach the students that they support.
Yeah, I tried really hard. Anytime I present, I listen to my colleagues, my classroom teacher colleagues and library friends, and I try so hard to make the presentations actionable and just things that you feel like, okay, I know why it needs to be done, but tell me how to do it. And so not only that, but I was trying to, even though I'm viewing things through my elementary library lens, I didn't make sure to include, it's not by any means, all encompassing, but opportunities and kind of extensions for the secondary level.
Absolutely. So for the people who are just now learning about your session, what were your objectives when it came to this? It's a 6 to 8 week sort of over the course, because you're seeing these classes, I believe, once a week for 8 weeks. And so can you give us an idea of what were your goals from the outset to sort of build into what you were going to teach with your students for basically 2 months?
Yeah, it all stemmed from a grant, as all wonderful things do. So it was a media literacy grant that is specific to New York. And I remember I had put together some ideas, and then I remember receiving the grant and being like, okay, so there's so much information when it comes to media literacy, and trying to talk to upper elementary. And, it does feel a little, I don't want to say forced, but it is a lot for someone who's 10 or 11 to comprehend or be able to kind of wrap their head around. And so I just research and research and research. And then at the end of the day, I just decided that I needed my students to just question things. So when it came to anything, any place that they were viewing information, they just needed to become critical thinkers. So that's kind of the approach, the name of the presentation. So it's Lights, Camera, Literacy, Building Media Skills Through Video Production, but it started as question everything, building media literacy skills. So I really broke down after that all the different places that students might be receiving different types of media. So kind of an overview of media literacy. We talk about media bias and then misinformation and disinformation. And then it breaks down into, more specific skills, or whether it's understanding what clickbait is in advertising programs, understanding why images might be manipulated in videos. And then we talk a lot about social media. That's my favorite. That's my sweet spot. But the point really was to get the kids to understand, the difference between misinformation bias, analyzing messages, and just being able to apply those critical thinking skills as they move through their bombardment of media coming at them each day.
Encouraging this critical lens, encouraging our students to be inquisitive, that is applicable at every step of their young adult lives. We want adults. I'm sorry. If we stop being inquisitive, then I think that is a failing on the part of adults. It's certainly that once we've decided we don't need to learn anymore, or we do not have room in our psyche, in our brain for the possibility of something else. I think when you become so fixed in your thinking, that really is sort of when you think about the people in our lives who have stopped allowing for new ideas to enter their thoughts. And so this whole be inquisitive, I'm not going to lie, I picked up all sorts of things at the expo hall, including a whole bunch of really cool sticker sheets for some of my students. And on every single sticker, it said, be inquisitive, be inquisitive. And I'll be honest, I can't even for the life of me remember where I picked them up or what the vendor was selling. But it was these stickers and they said, be inquisitive. I'm like, I love that. And they're so cute. And I was sharing them with my teachers and my students. And it was like, oh, now you said be inquisitive. But yeah, this is an important message regardless of the age of the students we work with. And again, how many of us have worked with adults who are so fixed in their mindset that it's very difficult to work with them.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting too, because I feel like we've known that that we need to teach kids to be more critical and to kind of evaluate. We're in fourth grade right now, we're talking about evaluating websites. But the thing that I found interesting recently is now it seems like kids are taking things they're using their background knowledge as a research source. So I'd be like, how do you know that? And they're like, oh, I just know. So I'm like, oh no. So we have a whole nother level of, needing to talk about, where you're viewing information and trustworthy sources and, questioning things, even in the things that are coming out of your own mind.
Well, and I imagine that it's possible that something in library sparked a dinner table conversation, and that's not a bad idea. It's okay to interrupt whatever it is that our students are holding on to as established fact, when you recognize as an educator in their lives, we owe it to them to introduce them to new ways of looking at the world. They're too young. I'm sorry. 4th and 5th graders are too young to decide they already know what they need to know, and there's no room for any new there's no room for new information. So no, I'm very grateful. I think what you're doing is vitally important, and I'm sure your teachers are recognizing that the fact that you're teaching this is really providing a great deal of sort of context for things that they might not be addressing specifically in there. Maybe they are, I don't know. But, I'm sure that they're very aware that what you're doing has value, and that's important. So I don't know. I'm sure you have fans in your building. Your lessons utilize your own artistic flair, obviously pulling from some of your own personal strengths that you have coming into this, but you've also relied on resources that many of us are familiar with, like News Literacy Project, as well as Common Sense Media.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that I struggle with a little bit. I always create unnecessary work for myself. And so I wanted to make sure that I wasn't reinventing the wheel when there are so many amazing resources out there. I think, many of us have used Common Sense Media for, if it's even just digital citizenship in general. But I'm just become such a huge fan of News Literacy Project, especially on social media, because they will analyze like events happening that day and talk about, Taylor Swift is, got engaged to Travis Kelsey. How can we make this into a media literacy project? And because I don't have the time to do that. And I love that, we have these kinds of resources available to us.
Well, and I'm looking at one of your slides, and it just sort of outlines each week what the lessons were. And this really is helpful because regardless if our students are 10 years old or 14 years old, somewhere in the middle, it's really a logical progression in how you did this. And it makes sense that anybody looking at your presentation would be able to map out how they would make this work in their settings.
I mentioned during my session at AASL, but I'm always tweaking and trying to make things work a little bit better. And 8 weeks is a long time, and I know that we can hit on a lot of skills in there because we're talking about not just the media literacy side of things, which is definitely part of our state like information fluency continuum standards, but also just technology skills in general. But it's a long time. It's a huge chunk of time. And so I actually am trying this year to see if I can spread it out throughout the school year. And then that way I can reteach what's needed. And then again, align them with other things they're learning. So if it makes sense to talk about, evaluating, misinformation, disinformation, or clickbait right before they do a research project where they're searching online, then that aligns really nice with what they're doing in the classroom.
Absolutely. Well, and if you're introducing this to your 4th graders and then you're hitting it again in 5th grade, having that connection, strengthened, and it's all good. So it looks like you are also using a storybook. You use some media. You've got some videos that you do and a lot of images. My screen's going. Okay. I feel that so many of the image and video manipulation techniques should be taught to anybody who relies on social media and the internet as their primary news source.
Yeah. I mean, so for social media specifically, I made sure to include a lot of research, which immediately sounds like a snooze fest for, on a 10-year-old. But, memes are my friend. And I make sure there's a lot of, I throw in some Zach King videos from, a shorter TikTok, and just to kind of continually grab their attention. But the fact is that if you look at, there's a Pew Research Center report about 53% of people are getting their news from social media. And this is 2025. So I hope that at least if I introduce this to them at a young age, it will start to plant the seed of questioning and that critical lens, whether or not they're going to be like, I am only going to, get my news from a trusted source, or if they're ever getting news at all, at least the conversation is starting.
Anything you can accomplish with these young people is much appreciated by their families and by their teachers. Once upon a time, I could rely on sort of spoof images on the internet on April Fool's Day. April Fool's Day was a great day on the internet because there was all this sort of garbage and people who had created, ridiculous things and ads. And this was sort of a pre-TikTok. And so a lot of these images were still or videos. And I think now the concern that I know many of us have is that because AI is so prevalent in social media, that when we are spending time on social media platforms, in many cases, what you're seeing is AI generated. It's AI slop. It's whether it's a video or it's an image that's been generated. And for some of these things, they're very, very obvious. And in other ways, sometimes you look at this and go, I don't know if that's AI generated or not. And, in some cases it's low stakes. It's not something that's going to influence me in my career, or it's not something I'm going to be teaching to my students. But my larger concern is that for people who aren't looking critically, they may take this all in and accept it as fact.
Yeah, it's such a conundrum because I am such a huge proponent of technology. I really lean in. I love this aspect. Obviously, I'm teaching media literacy by having my students create video, fake videos, news videos, but the AI part is, I was the second elementary certified sustainable librarian. The first one was Claire Mitchell, who is in another town on Long Island, and she's actually going to get her doctorate in AI and education. And I always repeat what she says, which is that now that we live in this world of AI, we can see an image or a video of anyone doing anything at any time. And I repeat this to my students all the time. And then I also have this example that I use where AI told someone to put glue in their pizza to make it stick to their cheese to stick to the crust better. So that's like my mantra. I'm like, it told you to put glue in your pizza. So just continuously reminding them that it's evolving and that they need, the things that we thought we could trust before we can't. So it's more focusing on like the lateral searching or, seeing another example of, going, or I should say, go straight to the source, right? We talk about Taylor Swift. What did she say? Instead of just relying on what a bunch of other news outlets or social media sites are saying. So there's other skills, but it's a wild, wild west, as they say.
Well, and I remember, again, April Fool's was always fun for me because there was always something out there. And there was one, and I'll attach it and link in the show notes. I hopefully can find it. But it was a YouTube video, and it was a BBC documentary, and it looked like a BBC documentary. But it was hilarious because it was about the penguins flying to warmer climates, and it showed the penguins all taking off and flying and landing in this lovely warm jungle where they could all be warm, and it was fun. But a second video came out showing how they generated this what it appeared to look like penguins flying to a lovely sort of South American destination where they could be on the beaches and it would be warm, and and it was a funny but spoof. But the kids watched it with so much intensity and focus, because they wanted to believe what they saw and understand this was more than 10 years ago. And but again, pre-AI, you would have had to digitally create. This is very much like the Jurassic Park and bringing those dinosaurs to life, but in this case, it was very believable. And now with AI, I mean, the kids themselves could have made that video and made it look pretty convincing. So, the threshold for what is possible now, given the prevalence of AI and how people like us can create things and make them look very credible, is not only distressing, but should really give all of us pause when it comes to how we consume that information in the first place.
Yeah, it's something I've pondered. I really, just to get the kids to understand how easy it is, I will include an image of them that I have two students that were huge readers, so I created an image of like a fake social post of them burning books, and just to grab their attention. And I've thought about kind of upping my game and creating a video or something like that of the kids talking with saying something else using AI, but I'm so afraid that they're gonna get the wrong message and they're gonna be like, oh, we can do that, we can make our friends say something. So I've kind of left it there, but it is definitely a concern. But that's our job, right? That's what we're here to do, is to spark that pause. And as they say on Common Sense Media, pause and think online.
Something as important as the distinction between misinformation and disinformation is, your 10-year-olds understand that if you explain it to them in a way that makes sense to them.
Yeah. So Elise Gravel has a great book that I've used for a few years now, The Killer Underwear Invasion. And it's really set up in a graphic novel type of style with the panels, but she does such a great job of talking about and giving examples of the difference between misinformation, disinformation, why someone might be motivated to spread disinformation, fake news, things like that, and just in a very digestible way. And then this new book came out, Don't Trust Fish, that I saw it actually a couple of times at the conference, because it's this whole story of how horrible fish are. And then at the end you find out it's written by a crab. He's just trying to throw fish under the bus. Spoiler alert, should I say that? Anyway.
In this context, I think we appreciate it, because while some of us will definitely be going out and getting that book, the rest of us need to appreciate how it was being used as an instructional tool. I think the wonderful thing is that there's plenty of opportunities to find content that speaks to the age group that we're working with. And thankfully, life does not disappoint. And there's always plenty of examples out there for us to use and update the examples that we're using from time to time. I do want to point out, friends, the image and video manipulation, which you've done, because you created these. Is that correct?
The students?
With your students, yes. Yeah, this is fun. You've got the kids burning books. Mm-hmm. You've got one of them riding on a rhino.
Yep.
And then another one which lives with lions.
Correct. And they're new images every year. And I make sure to mention to them that I created the images in maybe 2 minutes. So, if you want to get a kid interested, show them a picture of themselves. Not, it's exciting to see yourself up there doing something that you didn't actually do. And it's funny.
Well, and I think what's also important is that there's a very good chance that was the dinner table conversation. What did you do at school? And being used as a learning as an example to prove a point that you're with the permission of the students. And I think that that's an important step, is that there's that, my teacher asked me if I could do, if this was okay. And my librarian said, and I wanted to be able to be part of the lesson. And the lesson that I learned was this. And it was, that really hits home. And all of a sudden now the parents see the librarian as a teacher For so many of us, we are oftentimes not grouped in with the teachers. And for people like in Australia, Australians refer to themselves as teacher librarians. Why? Because we are teachers who became librarians. And for most of us here in the United States, that's the same thing we did, but we somehow just don't incorporate the word teacher into it. And as a result, not everybody equates us and what we do with the classroom teachers and the subject teachers. And we are. The difference is we just teach everybody, staff and students alike.
Yeah, it's funny because small districts, there's three elementary schools, a middle school and a high school, but because we're constantly hearing this, I literally had friends over last night for dinner, and one of them said, yeah, like a teacher has to be certified. Oh, and a librarian too. And I was like, I am a teacher. But we started doing something on social media. It's going to kick off this week where it's like, what are you doing Wednesday? And so it's going to be 10 to 20 seconds of what each librarian is doing in their program, because I think there's just, I'm making buttons today and you're pulling research articles. And there's just so much that we do that I don't think anyone would even imagine is part of our skill set or expectations.
Oh, exactly. And I've referenced this before. I do have a way that I track what I do every day at work. I did it out of necessity, and I've kept it up ever since because I like being able to show that I am very much satisfying a great deal of rules in what we do. We all wear many hats. I just now have a visual to provide to anybody who questions what hats I'm wearing today.
That's great. I'm going to have to steal that because I don't know what I did on Friday.
Exactly. That was my problem. I was like, I can't remember, and nor should I bother, because if I can write it down, just a quick little note. Let's talk about some of the visuals that you included. You talked about art and entertainment, and I'm fascinated about this because, again, the visuals are so compelling when you introduce these to the students.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that we're talking about image manipulation in all aspects. So we're not just talking about the negative, because I really try to, when I talk about Google, Wikipedia, whatever it is, I want to make sure that I'm being realistic about the fact that things are being used in good ways and bad. So it's, there is advertising that is done, images are manipulated to make things look nicer. We go everywhere from making a model look different than she actually does, to restoring pictures of your, great-grandparents. So there's many different ways in which it's used. As you mentioned before, I really do feel like I'm viewing all of these lessons through my advertising lens. And so I feel lucky that I'm able to talk to the students about more of the ins of advertising. One of my first jobs was as a receptionist for a food magazine. And so they had a kitchen right out next to my desk where they were staging food. And, I'm sure many of the things to make food look better, that's not real, in the presentation. Hopefully you'll see that, they're talking about using glue as frosting or motor oil as syrup, just because it looks better on camera. So there's good, there's bad. And then of course there's manipulating images to spread disinformation, or I guess maybe misinformation, but, with harmful intent.
Remind me, because I'm trying to remember when this came out, but the picture of the royal family, what was it? It was definitely doctored, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was, and I'm not going to pretend like I'm an expert on this, because I do I try to read mostly my fiction and my nonfiction, and I have needed to disconnect a little bit from news over the last couple of years, which is interesting that I'm talking about this topic. But so yeah, the story at the time was that there was a photo of Kate Middleton, yes, and so she hadn't really been around and seen in the public And then this picture was posted and people went bananas over the fact that they could tell things were doctored. So there was like the hands were, it's always the hands, were off and they could tell that it was doctored. And so everyone was so mad. But then I explained to my students that, again, on the flip side of that is that the reasoning behind it was for privacy and that she was going through something. And so there's just, again, question, like, is it real? No. What's the reason behind it? Is there maybe a possible reason that someone would want to post this picture? And so really just getting them to start to have those sometimes empathetic, sometimes just putting themselves in the shoes of the advertiser, of the website, of the person, in the media. And ask those questions.
Absolutely. I love that, when it came to the video production itself, you didn't have to go out and buy a lot of expensive, elaborate studio equipment. But how did you make this work?
So I was able to get some things through the grant, and that the majority of the money honestly went to WeVideo because I wanted the students to have premium editing access. And there is a free version, which is great. We like free, but it didn't give them some of the access to music and things like that. So I relied heavily on my public library. I like to say that I live in my public library. It's wonderful. And they have the library of things. I don't know if that's an everywhere thing, but I was able to borrow a green screen, big production lights. What else did I borrow?
So friends, there are almost 60 slides in this presentation. You've really been very generous. So no, you borrowed the tripod and the ring light and the studio lights as well for the filming that you were doing.
Yeah. So, and I know people have mixed feelings, and we are a one-to-one school, but I was able to borrow we have like a STEAM teacher. And so she had an iPad. So I was able to borrow her iPad, but I do film a lot of stuff on my phone and then just transfer it into the drive. But not much, I had a green screen sheet and we had some very affordable microphones that we bought online, and that was about it.
That's great. That's wonderful. I do think that it's awfully important. You've also included, for the purposes of our students learning, about advertising and clickbait. And let's be fair, clickbait, advertising has always been out there. That is not a new concept. Clickbait is. And this is something which so many people, and I'm thinking about, these are lessons that need to be taught not just to our young people, but I'm thinking to like our retirees. I'm thinking about when I know if we think about our own parents using their phones and becoming very confused by what they see because they want to put faith in what they see. And so no, but I mean, I love that you've also gone to the effort of explaining why clickbait is out there and why should they even care?
Yeah, I mean, the Common Sense does a really great job of putting together a lesson on clickbait using examples that would be very relevant to kids. So, and I'll be honest, we do this whole project with giving them an opportunity to practice, which headline is clickbait? Why are you motivated by clickbait? What are the things that they're kind of connecting to, which is this information gap. And then there's examples like movie times and, did you know Harry Potter, look at a picture of Harry Potter as a baby. And there's these different examples. And the kids do struggle. They think that interesting and clickbait are the same thing, or something having an exclamation point is the same thing as clickbait. So, you make such a good point. I do feel like we might need to have like media literacy for the older generations. I'm processing this. We're going to make this happen.
No, well, and I think about, like, I know that there are a lot of questions that, I've fallen for clickbait. I mean, who hasn't? And I think for me, my annoyance is not the misinformation, because I'm actually fine. Like, I'm pretty critical about as I consume information. But for me, it's the time that they have stolen from me. That's where I resent clickbait, is that if I look at the time, I have time of my day that I've absolutely lost going down some dumb rabbit hole, which has nothing to do with anything. And at the end of it, I've got nothing to show for that time I spent going down that rabbit hole. And I'm like, I hate this. Like, I absolutely hate clickbait.
So one of my prior jobs was working in digital marketing. And so we would run Google, campaigns where we would have to identify keywords and try to, whatever we could to get someone to try to click on the ad. And so I hope that it helps my students, that I'm able to explain to them the purpose behind the clickbait, the fact that eyeballs equals money, that, the time you spend on a social media, whether it's, an ad or it's actually someone's platform, that is money. Because I don't think that everyone understands that part of it. They think it's more of they're trying to steal your identity, or, which is sometimes the fact, but it's also just about trying to make you waste your time and get someone else some money.
Well, and I think that we also need to expand that thought just a little bit, because it's not, when you look at the intention behind clickbait and the purpose of it, it really is a distraction. It is trying to pull you in a direction that you would not have otherwise gone willingly or intentionally. But I think that is far more applicable when we start to look at AI. And how we are, I know that when you look at these chat bots, and it's very, I've seen some alarming statistics about young people using these chat bots as companions. And I'm scratching my head going, I don't need a companion. Like, I was like, I understand that they're looking, I look at AI for, just a sounding board. I think that that's not unusual for people when we're throwing ideas out there to get a sounding board. I don't need a companion. But it's an alarming number of young people and people who are lonely, who are looking for companionship. And AI has been really sort of moves into this space and is sycophantic. Is that the word? It wants to please the people who are engaging with these chatbots. And we have to be on our guard, because a chatbot is trying to give us exactly what we want. And depending on how emotionally stable that person is, this could really end badly. And so I don't think it's, I don't want to sort of, go to that dark place. But I think that in teaching our students to question the intention behind why something is on the internet in the first place is a very safe and appropriate way to start to move towards what is eventually going to be common, and that is talking to our students about the chatbots, which in many cases are really just trying to give the students exactly what they want to hear, which is unfortunately, the messaging can be absolutely tragic.
You make a great point, because AI is, we talk about that curiosity gap, and it's filling that in such a smart way, an intelligent way, that it's, it's like you said, it's whatever the kids want to hear and whatever they want. We actually talk about, when we talk about social media, we talk about echo chambers. And so it's which I giggle again, because I'm like, 10-year-olds know what echo chamber means, maybe. But they, it's just everything being repeated back to you, and how we can't be well-rounded, complete people unless we are exposed to different opinions and obviously we can't just be having conversations with ourselves or a chat bot that is reflecting our own opinions.
Well, and I like that you're using social media because now you've got their attention. It may not be something that's on their social media, but you're using actual examples on social media to prove a point. And in this case, you're looking at, really suggesting to 10 and 11-year-olds lateral reading. I mean, that's fairly involved for 10 and 11-year-olds.
Yeah, and again, it's sometimes I question, is this too much? And I know that it is something that can, fit right into a middle school curriculum, but I feel like if they have the vocabulary, because in fourth grade we're talking about evaluating websites, and one of the questions is it accurate? And they're like, well, how am I supposed to know? And I'm like, because you have to find it somewhere else, and that's lateral reading. So in fifth grade we really introduced the concept, but they're doing it in fourth grade just by finding the information somewhere else in a trusted source.
Well, it's not unusual for me to be on social media and realize when people are sharing things that are absolutely made up, absolutely garbage. And it's just, you're like, somebody's chiming in going, that's AI, right? And, they see something that looks, it's digital video rendering and people who are like, wait, no, that's AI. You'd be like, yes, that's AI. So...
Well, I love the example that, so it's in the presentation you'll see with the sharks swimming down the street. So my kid, actually, my youngest daughter, came home and she told me about how they talked about this. And so I was like, oh, but did you know that it was, the example in the slides is it's just keeps coming back. So it's being shared in, this incorrect image of a shark swimming down a street. It's like every time there's a storm, they're like, oh my gosh, there's sharks in the street. So it's the fact that we keep getting fooled and sharing this information again and again and again.
I was using that image before the pandemic. Absolutely. Every time there's a hurricane, it's usually, I think it was down the expressway. Like it was an expressway image and you saw the shark and he was like, yeah, that was before the pandemic. I was absolutely teaching that in elementary school more than 5 or 6 years ago. Honestly, when people see something, the first thing we do is we want to believe it. And that's that's absolutely the worst response when we see things on social media.
But it's easier, which is why it's so frustrating, because that's just the easier, you click, you share, you accept, because that's the easier thing to do. It's harder to question.
I was very grateful you had your students' permission to share their finished products.
Yeah, I have to go back and make sure, because someone asked me if I had permission from Ralph, so I need to make sure that I can share that in a wider audience.
I'm very grateful for your time today. You put together this amazing presentation, and again, there's so many people who would have loved to have been able to see you in person like I did, and you have generously shared of your time and your talent and your presentation. So I'm so grateful. Would you let listeners know how we can find you on social media?
Absolutely. So I am on Instagram as Kelsey is a book nerd. And that is it. I am only on Instagram.
I think that's smart because I'll tell you what, when it comes to wasting time online, there's a great deal of time that I think I have definitely wasted trying to reach people when social media, for so many people, especially right now, is really just, it leaves us feeling worse than we did before we engaged. And I love the podcast because we can just create this space where we can celebrate the work that we do and then share it out with a very grateful and appreciative audience. Kelsey LaPort, you are wonderful. I hope you have a fantastic week. Kelsey, it's going to be Halloween when your episode comes out. So hopefully there's going to be trick-or-treaters and a great deal of candy. But thank you very much. And I am very excited to see you in 2 years in Portland.
Thank you so much for having me. This was a lot of fun.
Friends, if you found this episode helpful, please share it out with your team, your PLN, and on social media. Be sure to follow on your favorite podcatcher so you'll never miss an episode. And if you really like listening today, consider leaving a review wherever you listen to podcasts. Reviews help others find us. If you're curious to know how often your state or country has been featured on the podcast, then simply click on the link, which can be found in our show notes, search title, author, state, and country, and do a Command F search. I hope this is the year you consider being a guest on the show. Please visit the FAQs in every episode, and you'll realize just how easy it is. We all have something to share. Make Season 8 your time to shine. Next week, I will be traveling to Williamsburg, Virginia to join the Virginia Association of School Librarians celebrating their 50th anniversary. I am thrilled to be invited and sharing many of them on an upcoming episode, Spotlight Vassal, featuring the talented and inspiring school librarians of Virginia. I hope you will tune in.